Hi everyone, welcome to our Unite Now session that is part of the Indie XP series called The Game Within the Game, Ad Monetization and Game Design. My name is Hwan Lee, client partner supporting ad monetization partnerships with developers in Unity Ads team. Today we will be touching on one of the very beginning topics around monetization for free-to-play games. In particular, we'll go a little bit further into ad monetization. And today we have Jamar Graham, who has recently joined us as partner manager on the publisher operations team here at Unity.
Thanks, Ilwan. Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this. Recently, I've worked at kind of bigger companies, Scopely and Disney, but before then, for pretty much a decade, I worked at small indie companies, so I definitely understand the struggles there. And when I worked there, I really loved these sort of conversations. So I'm very excited to get into this topic.
All right, awesome. Thank you for joining us. And really, what we want to cover today is when we get into calls with a lot of developers and publishers who are just getting started on monetization, they ask a lot of similar questions. So some of the questions that we kind of put together here is, what are some of the things that they need to consider when they get started on ad monetization? And what are some of the effective ways to implement different types of ad unit designs and ad formats? And following that, we have a lot of questions that are asking, are there any basic strategies on maximizing ad revenue? And lastly, they ask, what are some of the measurements of success and how do they know if they are successfully rolling out some of these designs? So hopefully we could cover a lot of this topic today with you, Jamar. And getting started, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that developers should consider when they first think about monetization designs?
Yeah, thank you so much. When I advise teams on putting monetization into their game, specifically ad monetization, I often try to get the teams to think about it during the game design process. That's because you really want the ad monetization to feel like it works with the game. So when the designer and the team is creating that game design core loop, that's a great time to start at least thinking and having conversations about how do you want to monetize the game and how should that feel as part of the design loop that the user will be going through. When you're trying to think about what your economy looks like, what your monetization is, it's really a discovery process in the same way when you're trying to just find the fun and find that loop that's very satisfying for the players. So you want to give it that time so that you can discover the best monetization for your game. Honestly, what I'm trying to avoid is having people put it in really at the end because it just feels tacked on. The player is playing it, they're having a fun time, and then suddenly they just have this monetization that pops in their face and it doesn't feel as part of the flow that they were in. It's just not really satisfying. So really, I want people to think about it earlier so that it doesn't feel tacked on.
So, Jamar, you just mentioned things like core loop and structuring the core loop and balancing the economy and whatnot. But can we go a little bit deeper here and provide a little bit more specifics on what the best designs for ad monetizations might be?
Yeah. So usually I think about kind of the ad unit. Am I doing a rewarded ad? Am I doing a non-rewarded ad? And from there, I think I look at the game design and see where it fits in the best. So if I'm doing a rewarded ad, I often think about, okay, well, in this core loop, when am I going to reward the player? So very common for free-to-play games, a player does some goal and then they'll get a reward. That's a great place to put a rewarded ad. It makes sense. At that point, because players are expecting to get rewards, and really the ad is just a supplement to the existing game design. So players often very much relish getting an additional reward for their accomplishments. Now, if I'm doing a non-rewarded ad, some sort of interstitial video or a static display, I'm thinking about me as a player, when do I want to break? When have I just done something that was super difficult or time consuming? At that point, I kind of want to just take a second and think about my next strategy and what I want to do. It's a great time to put in an interstitial ad. it kind of serves as a commercial break in television where it gives you time to breathe, process what happened before, and then continue on with your gameplay.
Well, so you just mentioned some interesting keywords here, rewarded versus non-rewarded, and it seems like there are different kinds of ad formats that are available for your use. But can we take a step back and kind of just go over the different kinds of ad formats that are involved here?
Yeah, I think it can get kind of confusing. So usually when I'm talking about ad formats, I'm really thinking of it from a design perspective. And from that perspective, I think of interstitials, which is, sort of you're playing the game and an ad pops up. It could be a static interstitial, it can be a video interstitial. Design wise, it doesn't really matter. You still want to have it in a nice break area. You might want to put in a banner. A banner is always on the screen, usually found at the top or bottom of the screen. And you just want to make sure that your UI is designed so that it's out of the way for important information, but it can still be seen. And finally, with again, as I said, that rewarded ad, you want the user to do something to get a reward. Now, the actual format may be a video, it may be a playable where they get to play a little bit of the game they're looking at. I've seen AR, I've seen, just some really cool, fun creatives that are there. But on a design perspective, they all fall into that bucket of rewarded video.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that there are some these kind of different kinds of ad formats that you could utilize. Of course, within the realm of the game design, right, there is the interstitial, the banners, which are kind of static displays, and then you have the rewarded designs. But some of our publishers ask, uh, what are some of the better, are there any better correlation between a best case usage of specific ad formats to a specific game genre?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're looking at your game, you kind of have to consider what the genre is, and not just the genre, but a little bit of how did you design your economy? What is the game experience you want? And then there's some best practices around that. So, for example, say you designed a hyper casual game, you're expecting the players to have very short sessions where they're playing something for a minute or two. You don't expect players to play it for months on end. There's very little economy. That's a great place to put a banner. So you want to make sure that it's when the user is in the game that they can see the ad, that it's relatively frequent, and banners for that. Now, if you have a game that's a little bit more complex, so a traditional modern casual game, you often are going to have some economy put with it. And so if you have kind of a light economy with there, banner may not make sense as you want players to play the game a little bit longer. You want them to engage with your IAP if that's in the game. So for that, you might want to consider an interstitial. Because the game is longer and you're playing for more intense sessions, players are going to want that break. So interstitial is going to fit really well there. And finally, say that you're really gung ho and you're making a mid-core game. You're going to have a lot of economies, a lot of things the players can do. You expect them to play this game for years. That is a great place to put reward in video because you're going to have a lot of different rewards that you can give them. So everyone's going to feel that that reward is valuable. You're going to have a lot of tools that you can use so that you can modify the reward so it makes sense for overall economy. And it's going to be something that players enjoy doing, so they're going to keep playing your game.
Awesome. So it depending on how the players are engaging with the game, and as you've mentioned, things like game economy, user progression, and the designs and the core loops behind that, seems like specific ad formats might work better in that game. Now, let's say that you actually, came up with this full design and you have it now implemented with your dev team, right? Um, I know that it's usually not an easy ask to start implementing all these ads SDKs for ad monetization. Um, so the question that I also often get is, how much development effort is involved in implementing these tech pieces, as well as what are some of the additional strategies to think about that kind of comes along hand in hand, right? When you're
Yeah,
implementing these SDKs.
absolutely. This is definitely the indie problem of not enough manpower for things. So really, there's a couple things you want to think about. If you're a smaller developer or publisher, you don't have a lot of resources, I would strongly recommend doing research and just picking one ad network. One, it's going to be easier to implement. The SDKs, if you're only using one, are relatively quick to put in, shouldn't take more than one sprint cycle to put in. You're not going to have a lot of maintenance because you just need to upgrade that one SDK. And if that one partner can fill all of your impressions, that's great. It's going to be easy for you to put it in, easy for you to test and start monetizing. Also, if you're kind of a bigger company, and because I've worked at those too, and turns out you never have resources for that as well.
Yeah.
So first time you're putting in ads, also think about, hey, this might make sense just to do the one ad network. Make sure it's working, get it really well tested before trying to get more complex. But I've worked with companies that had the manpower, they had the expertise. At that point, multiple ad networks with an ad mediator makes the most amount of sense. Yes, there's a trade-off where you need to make sure you keep up to date with all of these SDKs, that you make sure that everything is working correctly between the ad networks and the ad mediator. But at the end of the day, you have ad networks competing against each other. You're going to have these ad networks just fighting and spending as much money as possible so that they can give you money for your valuable impressions. So your ECPM, your average revenue per impression, is going to just increase with these multiple ad networks. So if you're a good team that's able to take care of that challenge, I highly recommend multiple ad networks with an ad mediator.
Okay, so now you have the core loop set. You have the designs for these ad units set. Of course, on top of that, you have the whole entire monetization piece. And then now you've selected the specific types of ad formats that you're going to use, and now you have selected you're either going to monetize with a single ad partner or use mediation to allow different ad networks to compete for that impression. So now you're ready to go live, right? And this is the next confusing piece for a lot of our developers. They ask us, how do you determine what is successful? Like, what are some of the core KPI metrics that you're looking at to or focus on to determine what whether or not you're in the right direction?
Yeah, I wish I can tell you your job is done, but really data is going to be something that you're going to look at as soon as you get your ad network live. So the number one thing you want to look at, end of the day, revenue. Am I making money? Am I getting my return for this investment into monetization that I put into my game? But that can be broken down in multiple ways. One way to break it down is effective cost per thousand impressions. It's that ECPM I referred to earlier. You want to make sure those impressions that you're giving out, you're making money efficiently on them, and you want to increase that number so you can make as much money as possible per impression that you give out. Another thing that I personally very much advocate is looking at funnels. Just looking top down, where are the best ways for me to optimize to make more money? And so when I talk about funnels, I'm thinking of two different funnels. One is my demand funnel. To break it down kind of simply, I'm looking at the amount of requests that I send out to the ad network or ad mediator, and I look at how many of those requests get filled by the ad network, and I have an impression that I can show to a user. I'm looking at the percentage there, and I try to get that percentage as high as possible. Now, on the supply side, I look at the supply funnel, and that I start off with the daily average users, your DAU. How many users are in your game, and are these users engaging with ads? If it's a rewarded ad unit, are they going to where the rewarded ad button is? Are they tapping on the rewarded ad button? That's very important metrics. You also want to look into interstitial. Are they supposed to be seeing interstitials? Are they actually seeing interstitials? Those are things you want to look at, and you want to see if there's any technical problems going on, or if there's any ways to gently guide your users to where you want them to go for the monetization. And end of the day, so retention. You definitely want your users to stay in your game, and you want to make sure that they appreciate the ad monetization that's in there and that it feels part of the process. So definitely look to make sure your users are not churning, they're staying in your game, and that they feel that the ad monetization is part of the game process.
Yeah, I mean, when you start moving into the realm of collecting data and analyzing them, it seems like there's a whole new world in live operations. Uh, but let's say that, for some of our viewers who are running an extremely lean team, right? Maybe you might be a one-man development slash publishing team, right? Um, what are some of the key metrics here that you would recommend to just focus on in the beginning?
Yeah. So again, as a person who's been the lone person looking at data, so sometimes you just need to look at the very high level metrics. So if I had to pick and choose, look at average revenue per user. How much money am I making per person? That's going to be a great gauge of how effective you are. Also look at, again, your retention. I personally enjoy looking at T7 of players to install. Are they coming back on the seventh day? That's a good way of seeing if people are coming back to your game and enjoying the experience. So if I had to choose just a couple to look at, definitely ARPU, definitely retention.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like depending on the game genre and also the designs of the game, it seems like some of the priorities on these data metrics seem to be shuffled around a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, it depends on what makes the most sense with for your game. So you definitely have to have a discussion and make sure that you're looking at the metrics that really move the needle.
Awesome. I mean, it looks like we're almost at time here, Jamar. But if you were to kind of summarize some of the points to reiterate to our viewers today, could you outline some of the points that you've discussed and share?
Yeah. So as a summary, here's the things I kind of want people to take away from this talk. Number one, try to put in that design and your monetization choices as close to the game design process as possible. Don't wait till the very end and assume you can just stick it in, because a good ad monetization design happens when it works in marriage with the core loop. So definitely try to think about it. Even if it's not 100% done, think about it as early as possible. Number two, when you're thinking about it, definitely consider the ad formats that you want to use. Obviously, the easiest way is just think about your game genre. What are the standards there? Using a hyper casual, go ahead and put banner and interstitial. If you're doing a mid core game, you might want to just concentrate on rewarded video. And also on concentrate, know how much time you want to put into implementing these ads SDKs. If you know you don't have a lot of time, you know you don't have a lot of resources, or you just want to test, consider putting in just one ad network and not going with an ad mediator. But if you are able to take that challenge, obviously you can make a lot more money with a lot of ad networks and ad mediators. And finally, you're not going to get out of it. You have to do some live ops. You're going to have to look at some data, pick and choose metrics that make the most sense for your game and that you're able to evaluate, and keep on it, keep on testing, and make sure that you're just optimizing your game as much as possible.
Awesome. Well, and thank you, Jamal, for sharing your valuable knowledge from the industry. And thanks everyone for attending this Unite Now session on the game within the game, ad monetization, and game design. We hope you've learned a lot today to apply some of this knowledge to advance your project. But be sure to check out some of our Unite Now page right here that's labeled unity.com/Unite Now for additional awesome sessions in the Indie XP series that dives more into some of the topics that we covered today. Today, we've kind of covered just the basic grounds, really, in a few minutes. And there's a lot of science behind not just monetization, game design, but also in the lives ops space. So please make sure to check out that site and check out some of the other more in-depth sessions, and also check out our newly launched program called Game Growth, where you can partner with Unity to accelerate growth of your live existing mobile titles. And lastly, feel free to post your questions on the forum or let us know what you think. We are exploring and gathering feedback from you guys to know which topics that we want to cover more in depth. So feel free to just leave your comments on the forums. And we are going to make sure that we are going to cover those items down the line in our future sessions. So stay tuned.